I funded a $20,000 Hawaiian dream, but my son left me at the gate claiming he forgot my ticket. He thought I'd go home and cry. Instead, I called my lawyer to ensure he'd never see a cent of my legacy again. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. I sign the check, and the weight of my bank balance drops by $20,000. It is a massive number, one that represents years of engineering work, but I do not flinch. I am 68 years old, and this is for my family. My son Simon stands in my kitchen in Oakland, watching me with an intensity that I mistake for gratitude. He slides the paper across the granite counter and tucks it into his pocket. We are 3 months away from our flight to Honolulu. I can almost smell the salt air and hear the laughter of my grandkids, Mia and Ethan. This is going to be the legacy trip, the one we talk about for decades. Simon claps a hand on my shoulder. His grip is firm, a little too tight, but his smile is wide. He tells me to leave everything to him. He says he will handle the flights, the resort, the car rentals, and the sunset dinners. I trust him. Why wouldn't I? I paid his tuition, co-signed his first home, and covered his mortgage when things got lean. He is my only son. I watch him walk out to his car, and for the first time in 3 years since my wife Martha passed, the house doesn't feel quite so empty. The morning of the trip arrives with a sharp, clear light. I have my suitcase packed and my Hawaiian shirt on. Simon pulls into the driveway at 1 p.m. to take us to San Francisco International Airport. The car is already packed with his wife Fern and the kids. There's a strange tension in the air, a lack of eye contact from Fern that I attribute to travel stress. We reach the terminal, and the chaos of the Hawaiian Airlines check-in counter swallows us. Families are hauling oversized luggage and flower leis. I feel a surge of excitement as I bump my rolling suitcase against my leg. Simon stops mid-stride near the back of the line. The noise of the terminal cuts through the air like a blade. He looks at the departure board, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He won't meet my eyes. He tells me he has some bad news. My stomach clenches. I ask him what is wrong. He says the words clearly, and they hang in the air like smoke. He says he forgot to buy my ticket. He tells me I should just go home. I stand there, the wheels of my suitcase catching on a seam in the floor. I tell him we have been planning this for 3 months. I remind him I gave him $20,000. Simon glances at his watch, then toward the departure gates. He says there was just so much to coordinate, and work was crazy. He says he is grateful for the money, but the flight is almost ready for boarding. He starts moving toward the security checkpoint, dragging his own bags. I rush to the counter, my shoulder jerking as I pull my suitcase. I call out to the agent in the crisp blue uniform. I tell her my name is Lee Willis and there is an issue with my booking. She types into her computer, her professional smile faltering. She tells me she sees no reservation under my name. I turn to look for Simon, but he is already several feet away, pacing near the security entrance. I ask the agent to search the whole party. She nods, her fingers flying over the keyboard. She tells me she sees a reservation for Simon Willis. It is a party of 4, departing at 4:15. There is no Lee Willis on the booking. The terminal seems to tilt. I ask about tomorrow, or first class, or anything available. I tell her I will pay whatever it costs. The agent looks at me with genuine sympathy and tells me the convention season has everything booked solid. United has a waiting list of 47 people. Alaska is full through next Tuesday. Simon appears at my elbow and grabs my arm. He tells me we need to talk, but his grip is a pull, not a gesture of comfort. He says this isn't going to work. Other passengers are starting to stare. I steady my luggage and ask him what he means. I tell him we can find another airline. Simon's voice carries a sharp edge I have never heard before. He says the vacation is happening right now and his family is already through security. He says we aren't finding another way. He checks his watch again, more aggressively this time. He tells me I need to go home. He says they will manage the vacation somehow. I feel hot and dizzy. I remind him I paid for everything, the hotel, the car, the activities. Simon is already backing toward the security gate. He tells me they will call me from the hotel. That is when I see it in his eyes. It isn't guilt or panic. It is relief. He turns and disappears into the crowd, leaving me standing alone in the middle of the terminal. I walk back to the counter. My legs feel weak, and I grip the metal edge. I ask the agent when that reservation for Simon Willis was actually made. She hesitates, then checks her screen. She tells me it was booked 6 weeks ago. It was always a party of 4, 2 adults and 2 children. It was never 7 guests. It was never meant to include me. My phone buzzes in my pocket. It is a text from Simon. He says he is sorry and tells me to take care of myself. I stare at the screen, and I realize they didn't just forget me. They discarded me. The departure board flickers. Flight 447 to Honolulu now shows as departed in stark black letters. My son is airborne, likely toasting a drink to a successful trip funded by the man he just abandoned. I pick up my suitcase handle and walk toward the exit. I am not defeated. I am 68 years old and an engineer. I know how to fix things that are broken. As I step into the afternoon air, I am already planning my next move. I head to the taxi line. The wait is long, but I welcome it. I need the time to let the pieces settle. A driver pulls up and asks where I'm going. I tell him to take me to the Montclair district in Oakland. I settle into the back seat, holding my phone where Simon's pathetic text still glows. We pull away from the airport, and I look out at the Bay Area landscape. I think about the houses down there where families are actually sharing meals, not calculating how to exclude their fathers. The driver asks if I am having a rough day. I tell him it is getting rougher by the minute. I ask him if his family ever turned on him. He laughs and says family members are the ones who know exactly where to stick the knife. That is exactly what it feels like, sharp and precise. I start replaying the last few months in my head. I remember Fern's dining room table in April. I remember her saying I might be more comfortable in a different hotel because of the noise. I remember Pearl, my daughter-in-law's mother, nodding along. They had been conditioning me for this for weeks. I tell the driver they thought I would just take it. They thought I would roll over and play dead. He asks if I plan to prove them wrong. I look at the cables of the Bay Bridge. I tell him I didn't survive 43 years in engineering by letting people walk over me. My phone buzzes again. It is a text from Fern. She says she is sorry about the mix-up and promises to bring me back something nice from Hawaii. A mix-up, as if it were a clerical error and not a 6-week-old plan to steal my money. I think about the $20,000 I transferred to Simon's account. He said it was easier to book everything from one source. I trusted him completely. We pull into my driveway as the sun sinks behind the hills. The house looks exactly as I left it 3 hours ago. I hand the driver $60 for a $47.50 fare. He tells me he hopes they deserve whatever I am planning. I walk to my front door and turn the key. I drag my suitcase across the threshold. I am home, but I am not the same man who left this morning. I change into my cardigan and head to my office. It is organized, unlike my family. I pull out the Hawaii 2025 folder. I find the travel agency invoice for the $20,000. I find the hotel confirmation for the Grand Waila. It shows 7 guests for 10 nights. I count the names on the list: Simon, Fern, Pearl, Saul, Mia, Ethan, and Martha Willis. My heart stops. Martha has been dead for 3 years. They used my dead wife's name to fill the 7th slot, so the room count would look right on the paperwork they showed me, while ensuring I was never on the manifest. I pick up the old landline on my desk. I need the weight of a real cord in my hand. I call directory assistance for the Grand Waila Resort. A woman named Co answers. I tell her I need to cancel the reservation under the name Willis. She finds it immediately. 7 guests, 10 nights, Ocean View Suites. She tells me the cancellation fee this close to arrival is $3,200. I tell her that is acceptable. She sounds shocked. She asks if I am certain. I tell her to cancel it now. The sound of her typing is the sound of justice beginning to move. She confirms the cancellation is processed. I ask her a final question. I ask what she will tell them when they arrive tomorrow. She says she will inform them it was canceled by the primary booking party at 6:47 p.m. Pacific Time. I thank her and hang up. Simon will know exactly when I did it. He will know it was deliberate. I look at a framed photo of last Christmas. They are all smiling at the generous old fool. That man is gone. I sleep deeply that night. There is no anxiety about packing or excitement about snorkeling. There is only peace. I wake up and make coffee. My cell phone shows 56 missed calls from a Hawaii number. I scroll through the texts. Simon is panicking. He says the hotel says everything is canceled. He says the kids are crying and they have nowhere to go. It is 8:02 a.m. in California, which means it is 5:00 a.m. in Hawaii. They have spent the night in a hotel lobby. My phone rings again. I answer it. Simon is screaming. He asks me what the heck is going on. I can hear Fern in the background talking about a complete disaster. I ask him how his vacation is going. He tells me not to play games. He asks if I understand what I have done. I tell him I understand perfectly. I ask him where he expected me to spend my vacation when he left me at the airport. He says that was different. He says this is about innocent kids. I ask him if the kids were innocent when he took my $20,000 and planned to leave me behind 6 weeks ago. He says that isn't the same thing. Then Fern's voice gets louder. She tells him to talk about the credit cards. Simon says they can't afford another hotel and everything is booked for the convention. He admits they put the whole trip on credit, expecting to pay it off with my money. He calls me an old man and tells me I am going to regret this. He says I am being vindictive. I hang up on him. I look at my notepad. Threats, insults, and zero accountability. I turn off the phone and watch a hummingbird in the garden. I am realizing that my kindness has been mistaken for weakness for too long. I paid for Simon's college, his mortgage, his kids' medical bills. Last year alone, I gave them $47,000. I opened the filing cabinet Martha organized. Every bank statement is there. Every receipt for Mia's violin lessons and Ethan's soccer gear. I find the business card for Bruce Harland, my lawyer. I call Bruce's office and schedule an urgent appointment for Monday. I spend the weekend in a quiet routine. I eat when I want. I read in Martha's chair. I don't check for texts from Simon. On Monday morning, I drive to San Francisco. Bruce's office is on the 15th floor of a glass tower. He greets me with a firm handshake. I sit in the leather chair and spread out my documentation. I tell him my son has shown me who he really is, and I need protection from his greed. Bruce takes notes as I tell the story. He looks at the threatening texts. He tells me this sounds like attempted financial coercion. He says that in California, this is grounds for disinheritance with legal protection against challenges. I tell him I want Simon completely excluded. I want everything I have built to go to organizations that will actually use it for good. Bruce pulls up the templates on his computer. We start drafting a new will. We decide on the Oakland Children's Education Foundation as the primary beneficiary. They will receive $400,000. UC Berkeley's Engineering Scholarship Fund will get $300,000. We add local senior services and veterans assistance. Bruce reviews my bank statements, showing the 20-year pattern of Simon's exploitation. He tells me he can have the documents ready for signature by next week. He warns me this is permanent. I tell him the relationship changed the moment Simon walked away from me at the airport. I walk out of the office feeling lighter. I drive back across the bridge. I think about the $20,000 Simon lost on the hotel. I think about the $3,200 cancellation fee I paid just to make a point. It was worth every penny. I get home and see a voicemail from Pearl. She is crying, saying they had to move to a motel 3 hours away from the beach. She says Simon and Fern are fighting constantly. She asks me to please help them. I delete the message without responding. The rest of the week is silent. I imagine them in that motel, realizing that the man they thought was a bottomless ATM has finally closed for business. I spend my time in the garden, pruning the roses Martha loved. I am not a victim anymore. I am an engineer who has identified a structural failure in his life and is removing the weight. On Friday afternoon, Bruce calls. The documents are ready. We set the signing for Monday morning. I arrive at the office and find 2 witnesses and a notary waiting. Bruce reads the key provisions aloud. The words feel final. I, Lee Willis, being of sound mind, hereby exclude my son Simon Willis from all inheritance. I state the reasons clearly. Financial exploitation, threatening behavior. I sign the papers with a steady hand. The notary seal presses into the page with a satisfying thud. It is official under California law. Simon is no longer my heir. Bruce hands me sealed copies of the will. He asks when I plan to tell them. I tell him their flight returns this Thursday. I plan to be at the airport, not to welcome them home, but to serve them the truth. I spend the next few days in a state of calm preparation. I go for walks. I talk to my neighbors. I don't feel like an old professor today. I feel like a man who has reclaimed his life. Thursday afternoon comes, and I meet Bruce at the International Arrivals Terminal at SFO. We watch the passengers trickle through the doors. I see families with flower leis and tanned skin. Then I see them. Pearl and Saul appear first. Pearl is still talking about a luau, seemingly oblivious to the financial crater they just fell into. Saul looks exhausted. Then come Fern and the kids. Mia is wearing a grass skirt and holding a plastic ukulele. Ethan has a lei of fake flowers. They look tired but happy to see me. Mia runs up and yells, "Grandpa." I kneel down to hug them. I feel a pang of sadness because they are innocent in this, but I know they are better off with scholarship funds than with a father who steals from his own family. Simon emerges last. He is wearing a loose Hawaiian shirt and looking at his phone. He sees me and stops. His face goes pale. He sees Bruce standing next to me in a suit with a leather portfolio. The vacation swagger evaporates instantly. Simon asks what I am doing here. I tell him I am welcoming him home. I ask how the vacation was. Fern looks alarmed. Bruce steps forward and addresses Simon formally. He holds out a manila envelope. He tells Simon it is a copy of his father's revised last will and testament, executed on May 25, 2025. Simon's hands tremble as he takes it. He breaks the seal and starts reading. I watch his eyes move across the text, searching for a loophole that isn't there. He says, "This can't be real." Fern leans over his shoulder and her face drains of color. She tells me we can work this out and asks me to think about the grandchildren. I tell her I did think about them, which is why I paid $20,000 for their trip. Simon's head snaps up. He is furious. He tells me I can't do this, that he is my son. I remind him he is the son who left me stranded at the airport. Pearl stops talking and asks what is going on. Saul takes her arm and tries to lead her away. Simon starts shouting. He says he will contest it in court. He says I am being manipulated. Bruce tells him he would be happy to provide documentation of my mental competency to any attorney Simon hires. He warns him that frivolous litigation is expensive. Fern is whispering about the house and the investments. Bruce confirms that everything is going to the scholarship funds and the Children's Foundation. Simon crumples the papers in his fist. He tells me I am throwing away my family over one stupid argument. I keep my voice level. I tell him it wasn't an argument. It was betrayal. I tell him he took my money and treated me like trash. Mia asks why Daddy is yelling. I tell her gently that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes with big consequences. Simon says he will prove I am not thinking clearly. I tell him to go ahead and try. I turn and walk away with Bruce, leaving them standing there with their luggage. We walk through the terminal corridors. I am not dragging a suitcase this time. I am walking with my head up. We get into Bruce's car, and he tells me it went better than planned. He says no judge would overturn that will after hearing Simon's threats. We drive across the bridge as evening settles over the city. I look at the lights on the water. I feel Martha's presence. I know she would approve of this. Justice is clean and proportional. Bruce pulls into my driveway. He shakes my hand and tells me I did the hard work of standing up for myself. I unlock my door and step into the quiet sanctuary of my home. The smell of furniture polish and the tick of the grandmother clock welcome me back. I make a simple dinner of scrambled eggs and toast. I don't have to worry about anyone else's schedule. I sit in my dining room and look at the photos on the mantle. Simon's graduation. His wedding. I can look at them now without feeling the sting of the airport. They are still my family, but they no longer have power over me. My phone is still off. I know Simon is trying to call, still thinking he can negotiate. He doesn't understand that some things cannot be fixed with a late apology. Tomorrow, I will call the organizations. I will set up the meetings to finalize the scholarship details. My money will fund violin lessons for kids who need them and meals for seniors who have been forgotten. I finish my tea as darkness settles over the neighborhood. I feel a deep sense of self-respect. I was a victim 3 weeks ago, but tonight I am an advocate for my own dignity. Martha's wisdom guided me through the betrayal to this resolution. Justice has been served. Lessons have been learned. My future is finally secure because it is entirely mine. I turn off the kitchen light and walk upstairs to bed, sleeping the sleep of a man who has finally come home. The following Tuesday, a black SUV pulls into my driveway. I am in the front yard, watering the hydrangeas Martha planted. Simon steps out, looking like he hasn't slept since he landed. He isn't wearing a Hawaiian shirt today. He is wearing a suit, trying to look professional, trying to look like the man he thinks I want him to be. He doesn't say hello. He asks me if I have had my fun. He asks if I am ready to tear up those papers and be a family again. I turn off the hose and wipe my hands on a rag. I tell him the papers aren't for fun. They are for protection. Simon walks toward me, his pace quickening. He says the motel in Hawaii cost them $4,000 for the week because it was last minute. He says Fern is talking about a divorce because of the financial strain. He tells me I am destroying his life. I look him in the eye and tell him he destroyed it 6 weeks ago when he sat at his computer and hit the book button for 4 people instead of 7. He stops a few feet away. His face is red. He says he was under pressure and made a mistake. I remind him that a mistake is a typo. Booking a trip for 4 while taking money for 7 is a plan. I tell him I have the documents from the resort. I tell him I know he used Martha's name as a placeholder. Simon's jaw drops. He didn't think I would find that out. He starts to stammer, saying it was just to hold the room. I tell him it was a desecration of her memory. He tries to change tactics. He says he is sorry. He says it a dozen times, his voice getting higher. He says he will pay me back the $20,000. I ask him with what money. He admits he doesn't have it, but says he will get a loan. I tell him I don't want the money back. I want him to understand that I am not a discarded piece of furniture. I tell him he can't buy his way back into a will he tried to steal. Simon lunges forward and grabs my arm. I don't flinch. I look down at his hand. I tell him that if he doesn't let go, I will call the police and add a restraining order to the legal file. He pulls back like he's been burned. He calls me a cold-hearted old man. He says he wishes he had never invited me in the first place. I point out that he didn't invite me. He just took my cash. I tell him to get off my property. He stands there for a moment, his hands shaking, before turning and stomping back to his SUV. I go inside and lock the door. My heart is racing, but I feel steady. I call Bruce and tell him about the encounter. Bruce tells me he will send a formal letter to Simon's attorney warning him against further harassment. He says we are also filing a claim for the $20,000 in small claims court, just to keep the pressure on. I feel a surge of energy. I am not just defending myself. I am taking ground. I go to the kitchen and pour a glass of water, watching Simon's car speed away. An hour later, my doorbell rings again. I look through the side window. It is Fern. She is alone, and she looks devastated. I open the door just a crack. She asks if she can come in. I hesitate, then step back to let her into the foyer. She doesn't go to the living room. She stands by the coat rack, twisting her wedding ring. She tells me that Simon is falling apart. She says they are facing bankruptcy because of the credit card debt from the trip and the loss of the inheritance. She tells me she didn't know about the 6-week plan. She says Simon told her it was a last-minute glitch. I look at her and ask if she really believed that. I remind her of the dinner in April where she suggested I stay in a different hotel. Fern's eyes drop to the floor. She admits she thought it would be easier if I wasn't there, but she says she never meant for me to be left at the airport. I tell her that silence is a choice. I tell her she benefited from the money I gave them while I sat in an empty house. She starts to cry. She asks about the kids. She says they keep asking why Grandpa doesn't visit. I feel a sharp pain in my chest, but I push through it. I tell her the kids have scholarship funds waiting for them. I tell her their education is secure, but their father's greed has ended our relationship. I tell her I can't look at her without seeing the betrayal at the check-in counter. I open the door and ask her to leave. She looks at me with a mix of shock and shame before walking out. I sit on the stairs for a long time. The house is quiet again. I realize that they are trying to pick me apart, one by one. Simon with anger, Fern with guilt. But I have the documentation. I have the truth. I go to my office and look at the UC Berkeley scholarship agreement Bruce sent over. It is for engineering students from low-income families. It is a beautiful thing. It is real good in the world. I pick up a pen and sign the initial commitment. The news of the disinheritance spreads through the family like a wildfire. My sister Clara calls me from Arizona. She is 80 and has always been the peacemaker. She tells me I am being too harsh. She says Simon is family and everyone makes mistakes. I listen to her for 5 minutes before I interrupt. I ask her if she has $20,000 to give me. She is silent. I ask her if she would like to be left at an airport 3,000 miles from home with no ticket. She says it's not the same. I tell her it is exactly the same. I tell her I am tired of being the family's safety net while they treat me like a burden. I tell her that if she wants to support Simon, she can pay his mortgage. Clara hangs up on me. I feel a strange sense of freedom. For years, I have been managing everyone's feelings, trying to keep the peace. Now, the peace is in my own house, and I don't have to explain it to anyone. I realize that the people who call you harsh are usually the ones who benefited from your lack of boundaries. I spend the afternoon at the Oakland Children's Education Foundation. I meet with the director, a woman named Sarah. She shows me the music room where kids are practicing violin. I think about Mia. I tell Sarah I want to fund a program that provides instruments for children who can't afford them. She is moved to tears. She tells me this will change dozens of lives. I feel a warmth that no Hawaiian sun could ever match. This is what $20,000 should have looked like, not a wasted week in a resort with people who didn't want me there. When I get home, there is a man in a suit standing on my porch. He isn't Simon. He is a process server. He hands me a folder. Simon is suing me. He is claiming elder abuse and undue influence from my lawyer. He is trying to say I am mentally incompetent and that the new will should be voided. I look at the papers and I laugh. It is so predictable. He thinks he can bully me into being confused. I call Bruce immediately. Bruce sounds almost cheerful. He tells me this is perfect. He says that by filing this, Simon has triggered the no contest clause in the original trust, which means he loses even the small personal items he was originally supposed to get. He says, we will now move forward with the video of the signing and the evaluations from 2 independent psychiatrists I saw last week. He tells me Simon just walked into a trap of his own making. I feel a surge of adrenaline. The man in the suit is going to destroy Simon's world. I spend the evening reviewing my journals. I have kept a daily log for 20 years. I find the entries from April. I find the notes about the dinner at Fern's. I find the entry where Simon told me he had the tickets safe in his email. I have a paper trail of the lies. I realize that my engineering habit of documenting everything is the very thing that will save me. I am not an old man in a cardigan. I am a witness with a mountain of evidence. I look at the clock. It is 9 p.m. I think about Simon and Fern in their house, probably sitting with their lawyer, thinking they have a chance. They don't realize that I have been 3 steps ahead of them since the moment I walked out of SFO. I think about the $20,000 I gave them. It was a high price to pay to find out the truth, but it was the best investment I ever made. It bought me my freedom. It bought me the rest of my life. I walk to the window and look at the stars. The world is big and my life is far from over. I am not waiting for a phone call that will never come. I am not wondering if I am wanted. I know exactly where I stand. I am standing on solid ground, protected by the law and my own resolve. I turn off the lights and head upstairs. I have a long day tomorrow. I am meeting the university board to finalize the scholarship. I am building something that will last longer than any betrayal. I lay in bed and listen to the quiet. It isn't a lonely quiet. It is a victorious one. Simon thought he could leave me behind like trash. He thought I would go home and wait for a scraps of his attention. He was wrong. He is about to learn that when you discard someone, you lose everything they brought to your life. He didn't just lose a ticket to Hawaii. He lost his father, his inheritance, and his dignity. And I found mine. I close my eyes and drift into a deep, dreamless sleep. The legal papers from Simon's attorney sat on my kitchen table like a coiled snake, but I didn't feel the bite. He was charging me with elder abuse, claiming I wasn't in my right mind when I cut him out of the will. I looked at the clock. It was 10:15 a.m. I called Bruce and told him the old man was ready for battle. Bruce told me to stay calm because the video we recorded during the signing was our nuclear option. It showed me sharp, focused, and completely aware of the $20,000 betrayal. I spent the afternoon at the local senior center, not as a client, but as a donor. I watched a group of men my age playing chess, their hands steady, their minds calculating. It reminded me of my years as an engineer. Precision was everything. I realized then that Simon's biggest mistake wasn't just leaving me at the airport. It was forgetting that I spent 40 years solving problems more complex than his greed. I felt a surge of energy that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with purpose. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Saul, Fern's father. He asked to meet me at a diner near the marina. I agreed, but only because Saul had always been the quiet one, the man who watched the numbers while the others talked. When I arrived, he was sitting in a corner booth, staring at a cup of black coffee. He didn't offer a handshake. He just pushed a folder toward me and said Simon was deeper in debt than I knew. I opened the folder and saw the credit card statements. Simon hadn't just used my $20,000 for the trip. He had used it as a down payment on a lifestyle he couldn't afford. There were charges for high-end watches, designer clothes for Fern, and a country club membership he'd hidden from me. Saul whispered that Simon had been banking on his inheritance to bail him out by the end of the year. I looked at the total. The debt was over $150,000. Saul told me that Simon was planning to sell my house the moment I went into a home. My blood turned to ice. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were actively planning my removal from my own life. I thanked Saul and walked out into the cool evening air. The betrayal felt fresh again, a raw wound in the middle of my chest. I drove home and stood in my hallway, looking at the photos of Simon as a boy. I realized I didn't recognize the man he had become. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my office and went through every financial record I had for the last 5 years. I found a series of loans Simon had taken from my secondary account, ones I had forgotten about because I trusted him with the passwords. He had trickled away another $30,000 in small increments, thinking I wouldn't notice the leak. I printed every single transaction. By dawn, I had a stack of paper that proved my son wasn't just selfish, he was a thief. I called Bruce at 7 a.m. I told him we weren't just defending the will anymore. I wanted to file criminal charges for financial exploitation. Bruce's voice was low and serious. He told me that once we went down this path, there would be no going back. Simon could face prison time. I looked at the photo of Martha on my desk. I thought about how much she loved her son, but I also thought about how much she hated a liar. I told Bruce to move forward. The next day, 2 detectives knocked on Simon's door in the suburbs. I wasn't there to see it, but Bruce described the scene based on the police report. Simon had tried to laugh it off, calling it a family dispute, but when they showed him the bank records with his digital signature, the laughter stopped. He was taken to the station for questioning, while Fern watched from the driveway, her world collapsing in front of the neighbors. The social justice I wanted was starting to take hold. Simon was released on bail, but the damage was done. The news of his arrest for financial elder abuse leaked into his professional circles. He lost his job at the tech firm within 48 hours because they couldn't have a suspected embezzler handling client accounts. He called me from a burner phone, his voice shaking with a mix of rage and terror. He told me I had destroyed his career. I told him he had traded his career for a $20,000 vacation and a dead woman's name on a hotel reservation. The no contest clause Bruce mentioned earlier was now in full effect. By challenging the will, Simon had legally forfeited the $50,000 peace offering I had originally left him in the first draft. He was now entitled to exactly $0. Fern called me next, begging for a loan to keep the kids in their private school. I told her the Oakland Children's Education Foundation was already processing applications for students in need, and she was welcome to apply. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I spent my days finalizing the details of the scholarship fund at UC Berkeley. I met the first recipient, a young woman named Elena who wanted to build bridges, literally. She thanked me with a sincerity that made my eyes sting. She told me her father worked 3 jobs to get her to college. I realized that I was finally being the father I wanted to be, just not to the person I expected. Simon's lawyer tried one last desperate move. He called for a mediation session, claiming Simon was suffering from diminished capacity due to the stress of Martha's death. I walked into that conference room with Bruce, and for the first time, I didn't see my son. I saw a defendant. Simon sat across from me, his eyes rimmed with red, his suit rumpled. He tried to reach for my hand, but I kept mine firmly on my portfolio. His lawyer started talking about reconciliation and family healing. I let him speak for 10 minutes before I opened my folder. I pulled out the 6-week-old booking confirmation and the photos of me standing alone at the airport. I told the room that healing starts with the truth. I told them that Simon could avoid the criminal trial if he signed a full confession and agreed to a supervised repayment plan for the $30,000 he stole from my secondary account. Simon's lawyer whispered in his ear, his face grim. Simon looked at me, his lip quivering. He asked if I really hated him that much. I told him I didn't hate him. I was just finally an engineer who had found the leak and was capping the pipe. He realized then that there was no more money, no more safety net, and no more old man to manipulate. He signed the papers with a trembling hand, his tears smudging the ink. I walked out of that mediation feeling a strange sort of grief. It was the death of the hope that my son would change, but it was also the birth of a life where I no longer had to look over my shoulder. I went to the cemetery that afternoon and sat by Martha's grave. I told her the house was safe and the kids would be okay, even if their father wasn't. I felt a breeze kick up, smelling of jasmine, and I knew she was at peace. The criminal charges were downgraded to a misdemeanor as part of the plea deal, but Simon was ordered to perform 500 hours of community service at a senior center. The irony wasn't lost on me. He would be the one serving the coffee and listening to the stories of men like me. Fern moved the kids into a smaller apartment and started working as a receptionist. The lifestyle was gone, replaced by the reality they had tried to avoid. A month later, I received a letter in the mail. It wasn't from a lawyer or a bank. It was a drawing from Mia, a picture of a big blue ocean and a man in a cardigan. On the back, she had written, "I love you, Grandpa Lee." I tucked it into the frame of the Christmas photo on the mantle. I had established a trust for the grandkids that Simon couldn't touch, one that would only trigger when they turned 25. They were still mine, even if their father was a stranger. I decided to take a trip of my own. Not to Hawaii, and not with $20,000. I booked a small cabin in the Sierras, a place where Martha and I used to go when we were first married. I packed my own bags, bought my own ticket, and drove myself to the trailhead. The air was crisp and smelled of pine needles, a sharp contrast to the humid memories of the airport. I hiked for 3 hours, my legs strong, my heart steady. As I sat on a granite ledge overlooking a mountain lake, my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from Simon. He sounded sober, his voice stripped of the arrogance I'd heard at the terminal. He said he was halfway through his community service. He said he had met a man named Arthur who reminded him of me. He didn't ask for money. He just said he was sorry for being a coward. I didn't call him back, but I didn't delete the message either. I spent the evening by the fireplace reading a book on structural integrity. The irony of my profession never left me. I realized that a life is like a building. You can have the most beautiful facade in the world, but if the foundation is built on lies, it will eventually crumble under its own weight. My foundation was finally solid. I had cleared away the rot and reinforced the beams with justice and truth. The next morning, I returned to Oakland. My neighbors, the ones who had seen the police at Simon's house, treated me with a new kind of respect. They didn't see a confused old man anymore. They saw a man who had held his ground. I hosted a small dinner for the people at the Children's Foundation, serving the food I liked on the good china Martha had saved for special occasions. I realized that every day I woke up in my own home was a special occasion. Bruce stopped by later that week with the final paperwork for the UC Berkeley endowment. The Lee and Martha Willis Scholarship was officially active. He told me that Simon's repayment checks were arriving on time every month. He asked me if I ever regretted being so blockbuster about the whole thing. I looked at the garden, at the flowers that were blooming because I had bothered to water them. I told him that sometimes you have to make a loud noise just to prove you're still there. It has been a year since the airport. I am sitting in my favorite armchair watching the fog roll over the Oakland hills. The house is quiet, but it's the quiet of a library full of stories, not the quiet of a tomb. I have a new routine. I volunteer at the university twice a month, talking to the engineering students about ethics and integrity. They call me Professor Lee, and for the first time, the title feels earned. Simon and I speak once a month now, mostly about the kids. He is working as a junior accountant for a small firm, a massive step down from his old life, but he seems more grounded. He knows the will is still ironclad. He knows that every dollar he spends has to be earned, not expected. He hasn't asked for a loan in 12 months. We are building a new relationship, one built on the ruins of the old one, but this one has boundaries made of steel. Fern and I are civil, but the warmth is gone. She knows I saw her silence at the airport for what it was: complicity. She sends me photos of the kids' soccer games and violin recitals, and I send her thank you notes. I attend the recitals sitting in the back row, watching Mia play the violin I bought for her. She waves at me from the stage, her smile bright and uncomplicated. That is enough for me. The $20,000 I lost in Hawaii has been returned 10 times over in the form of self-respect. I realize that the greatest luxury in the world isn't an ocean view suite or a sunset dinner. It's being able to look in the mirror and know you didn't let yourself be a victim. I am 69 years old, and I am the primary booking party of my own life. I decide who is on the manifest and who stays at the gate. The Oakland Children's Education Foundation dedicated their new music wing to Martha last month. There is a plaque on the wall with her name and a quote we both loved: "Kindness is a choice, but so is justice." I stood there during the ribbon cutting, surrounded by children holding instruments, and I felt a joy so deep it eclipsed every betrayal. I wasn't just an old man with a bank account. I was a man with a legacy that meant something. I walked to the kitchen and put on the percolator. The smell of coffee fills the room, the same as it has for 43 years. I look at my phone. No missed calls, no panicky texts, no threats. Just a notification that my monthly contribution to the scholarship fund has been processed. I take my coffee to the porch and watch the hummingbird return to the feeder. It is a small, fast thing, but it knows exactly where it belongs. The sun begins to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber, the same colors I saw in Hawaii, but this time, I'm seeing them from the home I fought to keep. I am Lee Willis, engineer, father, and survivor. I have navigated the storm and found the shore. The manifest is closed, the reservation is final, and the trip is exactly what it was always supposed to be. I take a sip of my coffee and exhale. The world is quiet, and the world is mine. I turn off the porch light and walk inside, locking the door with a familiar, solid click. I am finally, completely at home. Would you like me to summarize the specific legal steps the narrator took to secure his estate and protect himself from his son? If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.